Exactly.
I was younger when this particular situation came, and I was told, well, back in my day, we just got to do it. And I said, well, in my day, which is today, that's not acceptable.
No, we're not.
So, but being told like, okay, learn to pick your battles. What does that even mean? Am I really going to risk anything now knowing that, again, my health is on me? It's not them that's going to go down if I'm not drinking water. It's not them that's going to end up with frostbite. It's not them that's going to have. It's me in the hospital, not them.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Chocolate Espresso Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Newair. We'll float your fancy. I'm not too picky. Y'all, you know what time it is. It's my favorite time of the day, favorite time of the year, favorite time on the podcast. It's interview time, baby. You know how we do. I always say it. I've said it for the first season. Now we're in the second season. But, as well as I think I could introduce somebody, I think they can introduce themselves 10 times better. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone, let them go.
Hi. I am very honored to be on this podcast. I'm Rose, and I was raised here in Minnesota, but my family and I immigrated from the beautiful island of Haiti. So once I was just a little girl, a little toddler when I came, and I was raised here in the heartland. And so, Thomas and I were talking about doing this podcast together, and I was thinking about my business, and Thomas has a big heart for leveraging businesses and making more businesses exposed to you all. And I have a big heart for doing the same, but growing businesses from a heart space. And so it was just an excellent way for us to combine our energies. So I'm super excited to be here with you all.
My first question was going to be, tell me a little bit about yourself. But now my first question is going to be, we always got to ask, have you ever gone back to Haiti?
Yeah, so it took me a while to actually go back, and so quite a few number of years. And when I went, it was post-earthquake, and I saw, the damage that was done due to that earthquake. I believe it was the 2009 earthquake. I saw family that I hadn't seen in years. It was definitely a very emotional experience being back. So I've been back 3 times.
Oh, that's real. Culture shock when traveling, especially as an American, is real.
Yes.
We are such I'd say, as divided as people talk that we are in America right now, we truly are one big community. And I think in this community, the majority of Americans don't get a chance to travel outside the country. And I've been fortunate enough to do it. And I definitely know what it's like to go somewhere and be like, oh my God, wait, what?
Right.
So
yes.
I feel you on that one.
Yes.
I am curious though, because off camera we talked a little bit about it, but I'm sure I got to know, what's the story behind starting your business?
All right. So, I mentioned I was raised here in Minnesota, and I did my degree here. I did my undergrad. I did my grad school degree here. And the most of the work I did outside of being in school so much was with underserved populations. And so I worked with young mothers that were experiencing homelessness, youth that were experiencing homelessness. I worked with adults with disabilities, and I worked with adults with severe mental health issues. And the last position that I had with a major nonprofit was not direct care work, but it was working to navigate the programming. And I saw an immediate need within the gap between the business side of the nonprofit and what the people actually needed. There was such a gap. There was such a need. And on one end, it was being run like a business. And, and there was, although it was a nonprofit, we still were missing this heart and soul. And then there were several factors integrated into it, which has is a part of the culture with nonprofits is that dependency syndrome and the haves and the have-nots. And sometimes some of the haves just feel like the people that are not are almost like throwaway people. And so we even saw it with the donations that our youth would get. People would be like, oh, I know you guys need things so bad. I have this coffee table that's like 15 years old. Here you go. Instead of going out to buy some quality things, now we know that now older furniture is valued way more. But we were like getting like leftover things. And that's just like a snippet of an example of the kind of things that we were running into, or like we would be doing site visits for potential grantors. And they would talk about leveraging the amount of people that we could reach in a very non-soul-based way, where it's like, no, we can't just add 10 more youth to this program because these youth have difficult lives and they come with trauma, mental health issues, and we're working through their families, we're working with their services. Like, it's a lot emotionally. And so there was just this big gap in my team that I was working with. We did a lot to resolve. For example, one of our managers, demanded and commanded that quality things be brought into, the services and the programs for the donations and stuff. But it's just, Minnesota in general has a very giving heart. But there is this class discrimination that's integrated with racial discrimination as well. So the underserved end up suffering even more. And so, but we are so full, we have so many nonprofits. Why does this still exist? Why are these cycles still exist? And so you could tell there's this gap between the different various parts of these systems working with each other. And then when you even go outside of the nonprofit realm and to your mainstream businesses, outside of their foundational piece that they might have with the foundations, you're not really seeing anything else where they're really in tune internally, and that's reflecting with their leaders and what their leaders have been through. That's really speaking to the heart of the people and what the people need, right? And so I saw this need where our executives, and our managers, need to change, need to transform. And, and I was like, okay, so what can be created? And there was a point while I was working with a nonprofit, my first go-to was, let me get a business degree. If I know how businesses work, and I already have the nonprofit experience, I already have the experience knowing and working with the people that are on the ground, right? Mm-hmm. And so I went and got a business degree, and I wasn't aware that business degree really was preparing me to be a manager in a big corporation or whatever. But I did learn a lot of essential things, and so that business degree helped me, but I was like, I can't just rely on the degree. I have to utilize the transformational experience that I have and merge those two together. And so, I did a lot of spiritual development work at that time where I worked on myself, because one of the major pillars for me, when I created my business, I made sure I created a mission and vision statement, right? And then the goals and guidelines that I would adhere to for myself, so that I was a reflection of that to the people that I was helping or consulting. And so one of them was to stay true to myself and true to my values and what I believed, the kind of businesses and organizations that I believe that I wanted the people to create. Because one of the major things that is part of, my goals and my policies, that's seems like a fancy word, but it's a policy to me, is that to truly do something, you have to be it. You have to be it energetically, not to just fake it. And that's what a lot of people, nonprofits eventually turn into. A lot of people will get passionate about a business, right? They'll get passionate in starting it and like, I'm going to help all these people, and then over time life starts and you start to get hit in many different ways. And it just becomes, I just need to survive, through this, and I just need to make money. And then that's when the damage starts happening and people start getting ignored, the people that actually need what you initially started to work with. The people that are running businesses and organizations, they eventually burn out. And so you'll go to their website and you'll see like, oh my God, they do all these great things, but then the feedback that you're getting from the people that interacted with them are completely different. And so it's that burnout and the way that these systems are set up where, it looks like there's so many opportunities for the people that are in need of them, but they're actually not being served. And if we look at Minnesota, we see the amount of people that are still homeless. And that's like a big problem. We can't have all these great businesses and buildings and things that are changing with our legislator and things like that, and people are still not being served. Like, a nation is its people, and so there's obviously a problem with the nation if the people are homeless. We have to listen to what is going on with the people, and so so I started to really actually do that for myself because I worked with them and I knew that it was mental health. It was trauma. There were racial barriers, and I made sure I included all of that within the consultation services that I had, but also a major part was spiritual transformation that I had, because I believe that if your spirit is right, your soul's gonna be right, and anything that you touch and do will create magic, and it'll go on for generations. And that's one of my former mentors taught me, because he had studied in, I believe, Japan or China or something like that. And one of the things that he learned was like, they would not live for just, I'm going to just build this empire for today. No, they would look at how many generations will this impact? What will the world look like for this thing that I have created after I have created this thing, and they made sure they stayed on par with that. And if they ever felt like they were not in alignment with that purpose, they would step away, because they cared about their future generations. And what we've had is a very profit-based nation, and now making money is not right. But if the people are suffering, because you're making so much money, then you're not doing it right. Like, making money should be abundance for all. You're happy, somebody else is happy, then you're doing it right? But if you're making money and the people are suffering as the result, then there's something wrong with your formula. And so that's sort of what I worked at. I work on the internal needs as well as reflecting that in the external realm as well.
So when you talk a lot about, the origins of it all, and you fit that into the companies you were working with and I'm assuming they were nonprofits at the time too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now with your business, how are they able to find you?
So you can find me on your typical Linktree. So it's like Linktree. I have to look down for a second. Linktree Transformative Rose. I've been working on updating my websites and things like that, and so it could feel a little scattered, but if you look at Linktree Transformative Rose, that's LINKTR-EE Transformative Rose, that's me there. And then also on Instagram, Transformative Rose _business. I'm not active, but there has a lot of, if you're looking for like simple business tips, I have a Instagram page full of holistic business tips, and just talking about things that people are actually experiencing within the business world that led to a lot of people just leaving their jobs to pursue a more holistic and healthy life.
So that is a huge conversation that's been going on in our society, especially with like millennials and I don't know what the generation, Gen X, Gen Z. I don't keep up with any of that stuff, but leaving positions and jobs because they're not happy there, or because they, you know, their views don't align with the direction the company's going, or even just being burnt out from expectations from management.
Right.
It's really difficult. And you think in a state of like Minnesota, you know, you wouldn't really have a lot of that because it's Minnesota.
Right.
You know, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think a lot of other people who live in other states will probably say like, oh, it's here, you know, except for New York. Everybody knows how New York, I mean, it's just Chicago, and especially DC, you just expect it because that's the culture. But, you know, do you think living in Minnesota plays a huge role, or plays any role in your service for your company and business?
It does. You know, being raised here, I sort of know the landscape here in Minnesota. I think especially post George Floyd, that having happened here plays a big role, because I'm like, I already know. You know, I've already experienced some of the things that people are talking about, you know, some of the racism, you know, and just people not fully understanding or looking, you know, as a person who is of color, people looking down on you, you know, or jumping to conclusions about you. And so I've experienced those things myself, but I've also experienced the other hand where people are nice, you know? And so it's like really hard because you're getting that Minnesota nice, that Minnesota care, but there's this, there's this instability. That's not the word. There's this unbalance, right? You're getting like the people are nice, like there's so many great things, right? But there's an imbalance in resources and economic sustainability for people, you know? And so I've sort of, you know, it's almost like a cognitive dissonance, or, you know, you're like, how can this happen, right? And so I've experienced that. And so having known that firsthand and grown through that, it has allowed me to really develop the tools, because I know what people need here or in the general Midwest and what people struggle with. I think I really understand the soul and heart of Minnesota.
You know, many years ago, I had a conversation with my older sister and a couple other people, and it started from a conversation I had with a high school homeroom teacher that I had. And I remember asking him, like, you know, when it comes to employers, there's this shift that happened, I think, back in like 2012 when Obama, I think it was really in 2008, but 2012 was when they really started pushing the narrative of like, let's have diverse hires, let's get them in. And I think it was, I rolled my eyes when Wells Fargo said, we want to hire like minorities in executive positions. And I was like, you know, I said, good luck with that. I'll believe it when I see it. And then having reports of like minorities in these companies go like, I applied and definitely didn't get it. And neither did any of my other peers. And they definitely didn't hire any minority. And I think it was either, I can't remember, it was an executive, I think it was either Wells Fargo or one of the other banks, but they talked, one of the executives came out and had an interview, and he talked about how hiring somebody who's best suited for the position and having the qualifications is extremely difficult, especially when you look at like minority hires. And I can't remember if it was the host or someone else that kind of pointed out like, well, maybe it's because they don't have the resources to get the education to be quote unquote qualified. And don't get me started on like the narrative of getting children to come and like focus on going that direction. So I guess the question really comes down to like, how diverse is some of the companies you go to when you give your service to them?
Yes. And I would say, I mean, we're here in Minnesota, and so it's a range. And I just wanted to add to some of the things you said regarding that. And there's more to be really questioned with sort of their answer. Like people aren't educated enough, and we have to really read the laws behind why companies actually would do it. Most of these companies won't do that unless there's some sort of benefit, right? And if we look at equal opportunity laws, there are some times, and I can't quote what the law is, but there's sometimes companies will benefit for advertising jobs towards minorities. Like they'll have, so like, and they might not even have to hire them, but they, as long as it looks like they're trying to, like there are ways that people do that. And then you're working with these companies that are the top companies of the nation. There are things that they can do and create within their systems if they're working with, if quote unquote, what they're saying is minorities don't have the education, they can create that,
create a path,
they can create, they have the resources to do that, and so there really isn't a true excuse when it comes to that. Yes. But going back to your question, how diverse? So I've worked with a lot of wellness companies. I would say they're diverse in thought, in perspective. I would say a lot of the people that I've worked with are open, and understand the impact of trauma. And that has been a major reason why I've worked with them, because they were willing to receive and be receptive to that feedback, right? And, I have worked with other companies that are more diverse, but a lot of times it is in the majority Caucasian spaces, being Minnesota, but I am working on expanding and also creating pathways where more people can come that are low income and get benefits from my services as well. I don't know. Like I feel like if I did like a mashup of all the times I'd say certain things, would be like one of the biggest ones. Yes.
I think one of the only pipelines that should ever exist in modern times should be the pipeline to success.
Yeah.
And I think having broader conversations about these things today helps create the foundation for our youth to really kind of be pushed towards the narrative of like, okay, I think the first parts of that foundation was like seeing a minority in a position like a lawyer or, a doctor, police, things of that nature. But really pushing the narrative, especially in these underdeveloped communities, getting children to really focus on their education and hopefully even coming up with working with companies to get more grants, and scholarships. So that way students who would go to college and want to and need to for their career path know that the financial burden isn't a concern anymore. Like just eliminating that might be one of the fastest and easier ways to kind of like get these diverse hires into place. But then you also, like you said, you're also dealing with corporations that might just be posting stuff saying, hey, we're looking to have diversity hires, and they're not actually accepting applications. It's,
yes.
Which seems to be the huge case in general now, where they post jobs and they're never hiring people.
Yes. And, for me, I'll say this. It's not only about diversity hires. It's about the soul of your company, what it's doing, because good and evil exist in anybody, any human being. And so I want, no matter what your skin color is, what is your sole purpose, right? What are you creating in this world to make the world a better place for others and for yourself and for your future generations? And I want that for the people that look like me, and I want that for the people that are relative to me, because we're all family, right? We're all family. And so I believe once you are able to get in touch with your heart and soul, and you can begin to work towards the trauma that might make you a major workaholic and not care and just keep, putting in the numbers, or throw yourself into work, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what have I been doing, in society for the last few years, and you're 60 or 70 or 80 and you're wondering like, what did I leave behind, right? Because you just threw yourself into work, to get distracted from the other things, right? But instead, taking the courage to stop, and work on your heart, work on your soul, and begin to work on the values and question, the programming society gave to you about what life should look like, right? And then when you begin to work on yourself and transform from within while thinking about what is this thing I want to create, then you will leave such a wonderful and beautiful impact on society. And so, yes, and that, I believe will lead to you being lead to you impacting all people, right? And I believe that at some point, because one of the things within my business is looking at your ancestry. What is your ancestral trauma when it comes to racism, right? Like we don't ignore that. We look at that. To work with me, you have to. You have to be comfortable with working with me. And so, what does that look like? What programming have you had around racism? Have you really took the time? Like, you might know you don't want to be racist, right? But you may have been raised with a grandma that was, and how did that affect you and the way you see the world, and the way you justified things, right? Because we could only have these experiences like the inequity that we have in society if the other people that don't experience it didn't have a way to justify it, right? And so we really actually look at that, when we're working towards, who you want to become in the future, and looking at, what your life path is and different tools that we use towards getting you to this goal of creating this business that's going to be an impact for the world, or being able to manage, the corporation you run, in a better way that's more transformative and trauma informed.
So when you work heavily with a lot of other businesses, especially when you go through different services, and you've done this plenty of times, like, what are some of the things that you would love to change or add to your service?
I would say one of the major things that I want to incorporate is, the world is changing vastly right now. So it's the best time to think outside of the box. And I believe with the mental health crisis that we're experiencing, we need these tools that cater to mental health, that reach out to mental health, and that impact mental health integrated in everything we do. And I believe that's where society is heading. We're trying to heal as a world, right? And so I've been working to integrate music, because there's a lot of study about the impact of frequency and vibration on mental health. Also visuals and colors, like the things that our senses respond to. And this is nothing new, because some of our major branding and marketing, they use these things, to make money, right? But now, why not use these things to heal? And so that's what I've been doing, like, as a music artist myself, like, that's what I've been creating, but first, like, taking the time to tap into my own truth, right? Not what I believe everyone wants me to do, but like, what is my own truth? And then how can that be reflected to something that other people can enjoy and relate to? And so integrating music, like, into my workshops and different things like that are things that I want to do. Integrating the sense of smell, right? When I'm working with a client, I do that now. Like, we'll work with essential oils, things like that. Integrating, healthy touch, that's with somatic therapy, right? But like when leading a workshop, for example, like, having people practice healthy touch, where they're breathing and are in tune with their body and stuff like that. And this is like something that some corporations have started, like they've integrated mindfulness rooms and things like that, where people can go and breathe and things like that. So I've been wanting to integrate that more into my services, where it's holistic and we're working with the senses. Because when you work with the senses, that expands your nervous system. You're not in that fight or flight mode as much, and you have just opened up your cells to be receptive.
I think it's really fascinating, especially watching like futuristic movies and seeing like where we think our society is like heading towards or what it could be in the future. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen any rooms in corporations or, you know, in the background, but I have seen like the mother rooms where you could like, when you can pump,
lactation.
and stuff like that. I've seen those in earlier like 2090s movies, and I've definitely seen it come into fruition. I would love to see like a mental break room for certain industries, and I'm a strong and extremely firm believer that if you work in certain industries, especially when you work for the general public, I think therapy is a given. I think it should be included in every insurance. You shouldn't have to pay a dime for it because unfortunately, when you work with the general public, you get all colors. And sometimes, depending on that industry, you're gonna get the ugliest of the ugliest of some things. You might get the bottom of the barrel of like somebody's like worst time in their life. Like this is a period that they probably don't want to talk about, and if they do, they have to heal from it. And unfortunately, you're just the third party that happened to be there at that time, and they're offloading so much onto you. So I think therapy is a must. I think finding and learning more about the science behind helping people cope and heal and really be comfortable, especially for their employer, is a huge plus. It's difficult. It can be extremely difficult, especially when you're working like a high stressful job. It can be really hard taking work home with you. So I guess, is it hard finding a work-life balance?
I would say so. Can I add one more thing to what you're saying? That is really important, having therapy, because you're more expansive and you're more patient with others. And I feel like I'm getting really emotional right now because one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I worked with young moms that got pregnant at 14, 15, and 16, 17. And I would help them get employment, right? But they had so much trauma, sometimes they couldn't keep a job, because you go in there and it looks like you're being rude or have an attitude, right? And that person's just gonna cut you off, right? And so I was like, what if we had jobs where it was a safe space, right? It's not that our young people, our youth, don't have to learn how to navigate in their world, but they're not just going to end up as another statistic because they have a whole world of trauma that's systematic and historical and generational, right? And there's nothing that's solving that, and now they can't keep a job or get paid adequately because they have an attitude because they have so much trauma, right? And so I think everybody doing this work that I'm talking about self-development, about therapy, where they're able to work with their heart space, and develop love and patience. So it's not that I'm going to take on abuse, but I can be creative and create spaces where people can heal and be successful.
I want to expand a little bit on that too. I'm extremely curious to know, where could our society be, especially in like the minority community, if we had services that were available to youth that were free? Because kind of like what you said, like a lot of our youth is unpacking a lot of trauma and they're not aware of it, especially children that are going through a traumatic time. I truly believe pregnancy is traumatic. It is a huge burden. It's a tax on the body, physically and mentally. And it's extremely worse when you're younger because there's other things I personally believe that our children could be doing other than having children. But that going somewhere where you can get help unpacking that and finding peace so that way you can navigate life later on is extremely important, because you sometimes, and a lot of times, especially now more than ever, I think when they say the Black community, when they are sick, everybody else starts to get a cough. So and you can see that being passed around to all communities in America. The youth aren't necessarily getting the things or the resources they need from home And sometimes it could just genuinely be that the home doesn't have the resources available.
Yes.
It's not like they don't want to help. It's just they don't know how to start.
Yeah.
And it could also stem from trauma or a lack of knowledge or whatever the case is. But if there is a resource center you can go to, especially at that age where it's like, okay, I'm 14, 16, whatever, and you can get that help where it's like, okay, the perceived anger or attitude is no longer there because you were able to learn younger, like, okay, I'm not angry, I'm just confused, or whatever the case might be. And I don't know if those things exist, those resources are available. And unfortunately, I do think a part of that might be like, where's the money going to come from to pay somebody to do it? How many of us are selfless? Are you willing to donate 5 hours after work on a Thursday or something for youth to come in and tell you about their story? It's hard finding people like that.
Right. And that's where our systems are transforming and need to transform into, because it's, when we look at our youth, we are also seeing a result of something that's generational. So we are looking at adults that didn't also get that as well, and have children, right? And then their parents and their parents. And that's a lot of the adults that I work with. They're talking about the abuse that their parents put on them, right? And now they're just figuring out that it's important to heal through that, and then they have kids, right? And so it's so generational, right? But I believe we do have the resources. There's nothing limiting us, but we do have to think more holistically. Like, yes, it's the youth, they are our future, but how are we going to really be able to create systems that are beneficial to them if we don't know what that looks like for us, right? We have to be real with ourselves. Like, what would I, like you said, what would have life looked like for me if I had these resources? How can I create that? Like, we start to open that gene transformation from within, right? And start to create that for yourself so that you can reflect that back to the youth. So you're not just saying, I have this goal and I have this thing I want to create, it's going to be great, right? But then you haven't really lived it yourself. Like, it's almost hypocritical, like you might have a great heart and great intent, but it's short fused because it's not from within. It's not sourced from a deep enough place from within, where you haven't healed from the trauma from where you haven't received it yourself. And that's why you want to do it for others. And that's what we call savior syndrome. And we see that in the nonprofit world, where someone might want to reach out, and do great things. And a lot of people that work in nonprofits, like, they have big hearts, but they're burnt out because they're looking exactly in the face of their own trauma. These youth, they're not going to sugarcoat it for you, right? For you to be able to work with them, you have to come correct, you will have to have worked on yourself, and so that's where I go to, because I'm like, okay, if you are aware and you're on a journey, and even if you're doing your business, right, but you're on a journey of self-reflection, like, what am I learning here about myself? Where is this conflict allowing me to grow? Right? And then we elevate from there. Then you can create even greater things because you're unlocking wealth and richness from within you.
And that's why I asked, where's the work-life balance?
Right.
Because you can go to work and somebody's unloading something on you.
Yes.
And it comes home with you.
Yes. And that's exactly it. I bring all these ideals that I'm talking about to my own life. Like, if I am experiencing a conflict within my work or business, I'm like, what is the opportunity here? What am I learning here? What are the lessons here? And that's where the spiritual transformation comes in. Like, if you believe in God, or you're Buddhist or whatever, and you're bringing in these values, these are the values I adhere to as a Buddhist. Now, how does that apply to you in your life and growing into this person that adheres to these values, right? And we work on that. Like, okay, what do you think life is teaching you here. So life then becomes a school. You're not just sliding on it day to day, and at some point you just sort of flatlined, but you don't know that you flatlined, right? Because you're not really giving and receiving from life, right? And growing and elevating, you know? When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he has the first fundamental needs like food and shelter, and then he has relationships, and then he goes on from there, and then the top one is self-transcendence and self-transformation. And that's where everybody should be going to, constantly working on themselves and allowing life to speak to them so that they can grow. And so that's what I do personally. You know, I adhere to what I do for within my services is I make sure, like, if I'm burnt out, I'm going to, no matter what this appointment is about, we're going to have to figure out how to push it so that I can reload, you know, because if my cup is not well, then how am I going to give to others? And I'm not going to create a pattern of scarcity, right? That's not what I want to create and give to the world, right? And that's not what I'm promoting. So as much as I can, you know, realistically, I try to stay true. And that looks like maybe pushing a meeting back, maybe saying, okay, wait, right? And really post-COVID, I saw that with a lot of, you know, businesses that were very independent. Like they might have an amount of orders and they were backed up, and they would write, you know, you might have seen it too, like, hey, we're going through this. Our nation is going through this right now. We need some time, you know, to catch up, right? You know, but it's creating that kind of flexibility where we're more human with each other, you know, and we're not living up to these ideals that are unrealistic, but we're actually listening to our heart, soul, and body and being good to ourselves.
This is I love the two truths that conflict with one another. I had a famous one a while back that blew up, and then we have another one where it's you can know yourself so well that you don't know yourself at all.
Right.
I am one of those people, and I'm still learning so much about myself, and I'm still figuring things out. And it's a beautiful saying where you can go back and you can say, well, that was me from last year. That's not me today. You know, that's I'm done with that. I've had friends that, you know, they stopped smoking or they stopped drinking or they're cutting back on a lot of the stuff. They're trying to be a little healthier, you know, they're growing, you know, and it's a beautiful thing seeing it, especially when people are able to like become more friendly or more open, more social, more capable of, you know, again, taking loads from other people and being able to go, okay, it's not me, right? They're going through something. I recognize that.
Yes, exactly.
And they're able to learn that, like, I can't take that personal, and I don't know if I can help them. And having that conversation with them is like 1,000 steps ahead of where they were like last year because they had to learn. It was a huge process. And I think a lot of people in America today, especially in certain communities, it's really difficult to navigate within that space because, and I quote from somebody, I'm too busy trying to survive to work on that. Well, you know, I get that, but you're not helping yourself in the long run, which is why I think you said something extremely great, which was like, in other countries like Japan, they're looking at what is the impact X amount of generations later. And if I think a lot of communities did more of that, they'd say, okay, I can't do this because I can recognize how impactful this is going to be negatively later down the road. That's why one of my favorite all-time sayings is, how selfless can you be? Like how much can you give away of your time to something else that can help those around you, especially your family? And a lot of people can't answer that question. You know? So, man, a couple of more questions here. What are some of the biggest takeaways from your service?
I would say watching people transform. I'm so passionate about people finding through that energy of I'm dedicated to myself. You know, like I believe your quote on selflessness is also, you know, how much in tune can I be with myself so that my selflessness helps others, right? Like, you know, and so I work with people that are passionate about what their gifts could be and grow into to be able to impact others. It's like the metaphor of the pebble. You throw a pebble into the water and it ripples the entire water, right? And that's exactly what my services tend to do. Know that the self-transformation that you're doing from within yourself will have a great impact on others. And so watching people get that over time and transform. Like, I remember I was working with one of my clients on something just as minuscule as creating her calendar, right? And creating holistic space in her calendar. And she was creating it from like stress, like, you know, I have to get this done, I have to get this done, I have to get this done. And we just kept growing at it. Like, how can you honor yourself within your calendar, right? How can you show honor to yourself? Because if you can't honor yourself, you're not going to be able to truly honor others, right? You're going to be sacrificial to others. And that's not really healthy, because you want to role model what you want to be. And you don't want to show to the world that the only way to help others is to sacrifice yourself, right? How can you honor yourself as a whole human being that deserves love within your calendar? And then you're going to know that it's okay for that to be expected with others as well. And so that is something that I enjoy, is watching it begin to click and people begin to actually live that way.
I think it's a really impactful conversation that can be extremely deep and rooted, that could also be utilized in other areas in life. I think when people talk about focusing on themselves, let's talk about the 50-30-20 rule, right? You can utilize that in finances, right? 50% of your income should go towards paying actual bills, like your mortgage, rent, cars, whatever, right? Those are legitimate bills that you really just can't do without, because congratulations, you live in a capitalistic world. 30% should go towards savings, ideally, and 20% should go towards, realistically, the fluff, right? 20% to yourself, maybe 10% to yourself, another 10% back to savings if necessary, or, you know, that Amazon subscription that you don't necessarily need, or, you know, things that you would waste money on that isn't a necessity. It's the same thing with life, right? 50% of your life, unfortunately, for most people, are going to go towards your employer. Most of your day, believe it or not, if you work 9 to 5, 8 hours a day, well, guess what? You got to tack on another 2 hours, because you might spend, you know, 30 minutes in traffic, you know, whatever the case is. Maybe you're going to, again, you take work home with you, so that a lot of your time is going to someone else, and you traded that for money, typically.
And I want people to believe they don't, like, it might be hard for a little bit, but you don't have to do it that way, you know, and people that are comfortable with that, okay, but why can't we create a society where, you know, you don't have to, if you love what you do, okay, you know, that's fine, but do we really have to give all that much time for somebody else's vision? You know, of course you're gonna grow with the role that you are in, but if you want to create something, you know, and not just work for the money, right, but have the money work for you, how can we create that? Like, I want people to believe again that it's possible.
I'm also a slight believer too in, like, okay, your job can suck, but are you making enough to find happiness in hobbies? Can your job help provide you with another service like that?
Yes.
You know, it's beautiful when you can work somewhere that you love. I think I'm gonna butcher this, but somebody look it up. But it's like when you work a job you love, you don't call it work.
Right. Exactly.
You know? But if you're working a job that is a job, or it's just work, well, okay, can you find happiness in the outdoors? Can you navigate that space and balance it? Some people play video games and that's happiness, and sometimes that hobby can turn into money.
Right.
It's a thing. You see esports is blowing up for whatever reason. I don't understand why anybody would want to watch somebody play a game, but I'll get it. You know, it's now $1 billion thing. It came out of nowhere. Maybe these corporations pushed it on us the right way and they marketed correctly, and now we're hooked. I don't know. But, you know, that's finding something. I think we fixate on some of the ugliest things in our lives, which is, I think, natural, and we lose ourselves in that. And it's really hard because, again, if you had spaces where you can talk about this and navigate that, maybe these resources would help you like heal from that, and maybe you could realize like, okay, I can either find another job and work on that, or I can recognize that this job sucks, but I found out through whatever, I like playing the piano, and now I can afford this really nice piano, and I can do, you know, other kinds of stuff. Or maybe you find fulfillment in volunteering your time at I don't know, hospitals and playing the piano for children that are, you know, going through a really rough time in their life. You can expand on stuff, you know, and experiment. But it's hard when no one's going to tell you in your circle, like, do that.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
It's tough. Even when you talk about the fathers, you know, as another one, men tend to give up a lot of happiness without knowing, like, okay, you can find happiness. And some of the people that I know or even met out in real life working my job that have family, they're like, you know what? I worked a crap job, but the thing that made me want to do it was going home to my children and them coming to me saying, Daddy, you know, like, I don't know what that experience is like, but knowing how like these grown men that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, or even, you know, some that are in their 30s, they light up when they share that experience. Like, this job is just a job, but it pays to know that I can take care of my family. They're finding happiness that way, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a balance, but my heart does go out to men, because there is a lot of pressure on men, like where society doesn't perceive a man if he's not providing correctly. And a lot of times men don't get that breathing room where they can say, I need a break, you know, from all this. You know, I want to create something that's healthy for me and my family, right? I want to see everybody thrive, because happiness for one person is happiness for everybody, you know? And I think, yes, what you said is finding that balance. Like, don't like completely go broke, you know, like if you can hold your job, you know, while you create a plan, you know, towards what you actually want, you know, and you transform through that, you know, then you know, let's do that, you know. But that's what we do, like talking to our men out there, like, you know, how have these values of, it is a sort of patriarchy, you know, affected you as well, you know? And, you know, like, it is wonderful for a man to provide, but how come we don't have enough resources where men are happy with providing and happy with going home and seeing their children thrive, right? Because personally, as a spiritual person, I believe energy repeats itself, right? You may have provided like a wonderful foundation for your children, but, you know, I believe your children will have to resolve those unresolved things that you were able to resolve yourself because you had to only provide. And I've seen that with my clients, you know, where their parents gave everything to make sure that they had what they needed. And then my clients, you know, now they are they have that firm foundation where they don't have that scarcity mindset, you know, but now they're looking for emotional fulfillment, right? Now they're looking for all these other pieces that were still missing, you know, because the parent, although that they were happy to provide the basic necessities, they weren't able to give certain other pieces that are also necessary for the human being to their children, right? Or the trauma that they had, that unhappiness manifested in some sort of abuse, you know, even if it's slight emotional passive aggressive abuse, right? Because energy doesn't die, you know, and this is something that has been scientifically proven. We'll always try to find a way to exert our energy, you know, and so then it'll be on the children to try to resolve those pieces as well. And so I just encourage like joy, fulfillment, happiness, freedom for everybody.
It's again, it's such a rooted and deep conversation that can expand and expand and expand.
Yes.
Especially when we talk about the difference in genders and people and, you know, culture. There's so much. It's so loaded.
Yes.
It can be extremely loaded, and it's really tough because we are living in an age where these conversations are starting to happen a lot more. And sometimes, depending on your social media, you're going to get pushed on a certain end of it, or you might get an extreme end of one side or the other. And that's the thing about this. I say it again. This is the thing about social media. There's an algorithm, and they will push certain content, and it might push certain content because you go a certain way. And I always tell people, the best person is somebody that can look at the other side and actually study it and go, okay, I found 5 truths and 10 lies, whatever, right? Like at least you took the time to look into it and not just go, I ain't even gonna bother, but it's extremely difficult to navigate life in different spaces and not become how do you say, like, emotional in any form, like showing a certain emotion of any kind and not just kind of navigating through that and going, okay, I'm looking for something I can agree with and something I can disagree with. And then having a conversation about that and that alone, like you can look at something and be like, I don't care for anything that person said. Like, I really don't agree with him.
Right.
I understand this part and his perspective on it. And I think that person that is the kind of society where I'm looking for, me personally, is what I'm looking for. Like, I can absolutely be in that kind of society. I don't have to agree with you, but I can absolutely respect your opinion.
Yes.
I can comprehend your opinion and still go, I just don't agree with it.
Right. Yes.
And that's tough. That is extremely tough. Again, last couple of questions. What were some of the first steps you took in creating your business?
Yes, I think I mentioned this before. I had already started my business while I was still doing this role where I was managing about, I think it was like 6 programs at a major nonprofit, and I had started my business, and then I got pregnant with my beautiful son, and I had preeclampsia, and they didn't provide like enough maternity leave, and I was just stressed trying to find a sitter. My body's still aching, like all this crazy stuff was happening, and I'm like, there's something wrong with our system, because this is a lot for me. And I remember leaving that position because I said, if I don't, I'm not gonna be well, because I'm still healing, mentally, emotionally, from just the trauma of giving birth, like you mentioned earlier. But then I had preeclampsia, and then you're trying to navigate life with a new life, and that's why there's countries that give moms like 2 years, off, and so, and I remember sitting in front of the camera and just talking, and that's where, like, I had already started my business because I already knew what I wanted to do, right? But it wasn't really real for me, where I was really actually like, oh, this is the only thing I could do right now. Until that happened. And so I sat in front of my camera and I talked, and then, I had already had my like mission vision statement and the goals and my what I call high agreements that I made with myself. So those are the fundamental things that I had with my business. And then I just had started a YouTube and things like that to just get going. So those are some of the key things.
I am glad to live in a society today, or in the generation, that helped push, create, and enact male individuals, fathers, taking paternity leave.
Okay.
I had 2 male grown adults at my job do it. And I was like, where are these people? And I was told, oh, they're on maternity leave.
Good,
it's like,
yes.
oh. So that's what they mean when she says we're pregnant.
Yes.
Got it.
No, because the father does experience postpartum too. And people don't talk about that, but they do. It's really, it's a big impact. It has a big impact on the father. And then also you just have this new life. Most times the babies are colicky and you're not getting enough sleep. Like your world has changed significantly, and so you need the rest. The baby's father needs the rest. Like, yes, paternity leave is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, this and then the last question. My reserved opinion aside, but I do believe, if someone is having a child, I think it's extremely important, as someone who helped create that situation and helped create new life, should be equally invested in every step possible. There are some people who don't flat out don't care, whatever the case is. It's extreme. I think it's extremely difficult because a mother is absolutely risking her life those 9 months. Anything could happen. There are people who were 100% healthy, can be, ended up pregnant and died during that process. Ended up no longer being capable of having any more children after the first one. The list can go on. They can get all kinds of things, and I won't go into it because unfortunately I don't know a whole lot as to like all the different trauma induced conditions that come from pregnancy, but from what I know, it's like you're absolutely risking your life to help create life. Even in today's modern technology and times, like there's only so much we really can do from this because the body is so complex. And especially when it comes to like a newborn, like the list goes even further. And the fact that we men for years ago wouldn't be able to be there after the birth for the mother longer than what, like a couple of days or the weekend. Like the only thing you got was, oh, I gotta go, my wife's at the hospital. And then you're back tomorrow. Like I'd be looking at you like, go home. Right. Because she needs you more than you think. And that was always my internal feeling on the matter. Like I couldn't imagine being at work and staying at work and missing the first like 6 months at a minimum. Because she's gonna need it. Like there's so much healing that needs to be done physically, especially for a woman who just had a child, and there's help that you can absolutely do, and not having that is a huge burden and a taxation on somebody. So I'm proud of my coworkers for taking it off, you know, and I'm extremely happy that my company offered that to them. We don't get paid when we take time off anyway, but you know, still, it's just the idea that you can't hold that over somebody, especially when they come back and you're like, okay, you've been gone for 6 months and now you want to go on vacation? Like, well, yeah, because I want to still go home and be with my family.
That
like,
makes sense.
What you gonna do? Nothing. But yeah, it's extremely interesting, and like I said, we got to target. Everybody targets the youth,
right?
Especially advertisement. We got to target the youth, and I think pushing the narrative of like, okay, there's going to be a time where this is going to happen for some of you, and when it happens, both sides need to recognize that, like, work together for who, like you made choices, it led to this. Now make preemptive choices that will help protect that process, because if you don't, you know, it could go either way. And it's I don't know, it does break my heart when I hear people who are like, I haven't seen my kid in like blah 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 blah, and I'm like, well, how old is your kid? And you're under 16. Like, what do you mean you haven't seen them? You know, like that's I don't know, it's a burden. Don't get me started. Last question, and I don't want to butcher this, but what are some of the I'm gonna read the question because I don't want to mess this up. What are some tips you would give someone or anyone watching this that they could put into practice in their office/business?
All right. So first of all, I want you to think about, is your soul being fed, you know? And then how can you first transform your own workplace? Because perhaps you never thought about this, right? How are you feeding your soul and your spirit? Like, do you really have to just turn off a part of you to actually work, you know? But how can you make work something that is transformative for you? And I want you to really think about that. And then here's some tips that I do with my clients is that when they're even making, let's say, a to-do list, like a task list, like take your time, you know, and you could start off going slow. Like that's the first step, right? And then think about like, what are the things in the back of your mind? Like, how's your body making the to-do list? Are you stressed while making the to-do list, right? Like I'm very holistic, where I believe the little things that we do impact all the big things, right?
Absolutely.
And so like just a little thing like the to-do list, and I've seen that could really impact your whole day. Like, what if you took your time and was like, I'm gonna make this to-do list, right? And I'm going to listen to my body and try to arrange this to-do list in a way where it's going to be good for me, right? I might not be happy with everything I want to do. That's just life, right? But how can I make sure that I'm fed spiritually, mentally, and emotionally within this to-do list, right? Because I believe every single experience is like and it's almost like a movie. Like we can learn and grow from every single experience, right? It can be so dynamic. And so not looking at the different things that you have to do to your day as like some minuscule things, but where am I learning and growing through every single phase of my day and these tasks that I have to do? You know, you begin to make these things a little bit more richer where they are feeding you more, right? And so it's that. And then just, you know, your regular, you know, worth life health things like taking time to stretch, taking a break, pausing, little things like that, where you're beginning to show yourself some love, because we haven't really accounted for the amount of self-abuse that workers have done to themselves, you know, by not really paying attention to their needs, right? And so I want you to begin to really grow in that intimate relationship with self, with work, you know, learning to be good to yourself within work. And so that's what I would leave with you.
Yeah. I will leave off with this one. So I work for utilities, part of a union. Both sides push heavily safety. And part of the safety, especially the safety talks that we have, there's been a push recently in the last couple of years where they do talk about taking breaks. They realize like we have people going down because they're dehydrated, like need to go to and get an ambulance. Like it's as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
I'd be thinking to myself, how does it get to that point? Like, why are you not stopping? You know?
Exactly. And that's what we were talking about. People throw themselves at work and it is kind of self-abuse, you know, but you don't know that. You're just like, I have to do this. I don't want to do this. So I'm just going to shut down and just do it. Yeah. Right. And then you just get in the mode of doing it and you're not realizing the burden that you're putting on yourself in your body, you know? And so, yeah, I do think that people do get into that mode.
It's deep. And it's like, and it's crazy to me because it's like almost every day, especially in the summer, it's like drink water, hydrate,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
if you need anything, let us know. And then it's like, that happens. And you're just like, how,
right.
you know?
Exactly.
But it does click. Like there are people who naturally believe like, okay, I got to get these numbers, or I got to finish this, or, you know, I'm almost there. Maybe I can get, and it's that last little where something happened.
Exactly.
You know, especially not, and again, you know, I work in an industry where they talk really, we have safety talks and they talk in depth about like the cause, the effect. When you're in this position, like when you're dehydrated, sometimes you can get a little crazy or loopy because you're not making the best decisions because your brain isn't getting the nutrients it needs to make and process those decisions. And you're working in an industry where a lot of bad things can happen when you go down that path. So they're just like, this could all be mitigated if you hydrate, and if you're sweating, if you're sweating really bad, go sit in the truck and cool off. And you know, there's so much that's available, and the companies have to now admit. And personally, I know it's because it's a profit thing. If you go down, it's going to cost them more than if you just took a 15-minute break to just cool off. You know, even if it's like, okay, 10 minutes every hour, no one's going to care because it's still cheaper in the long run than it would be if you went down. And at one point, I mean, that's their perspective. Your perspective should be, I'm taking care of me. Right. Because my time is finite. There's only so much I got. And I need to make sure that whatever point in that timeline that you are in, you're taking care of yourself every single time.
Because some jobs, you're replaceable. You know, and you see people get laid off, you know, like, and so you have to come in there like you're a business, you know, you have leverage, you know, and so you have to come in there like, you're not going to be able to take care of me, right? Because you're thinking about your profit. Like, let me make sure I take care of my needs, right? And if my needs aren't being met, like you said, how can we get the union to make changes, like, and things like that, you know? But some people are so much in survival mode and have so much on their back that they can't, like, they just have to go in, get it done, and get out, right? And what does that create over time? So there are some older gentlemen in my company that they would rather, instead of going to the union and filing a complaint and saying, hey, where is this? They would rather and I quote, for 2 years, throw on an extra sweater to work in the wintertime when that jacket is 100% a part of your PPE, personal protective equipment, for those who don't know what that is.
And they asked twice. They never got it until I basically said in front of the boss, I don't know about you, but I'm not going out there unless I have my PPE.
Right.
And when I asked the second time, the first time I already went to the union. The second time would have been, I ain't going out because our contract, and that's when you need, like you said, it's a business. For us, there's a contract.
Yes.
You read it because you signed it when you went to the union.
Right.
So you need to make sure that, okay, if you're going to make a stance, make sure you're within your rights or whatever you want to call it. So with us, that's a part of our PPE.
Right.
You're not providing this for me. How can I safely go out and do my job in whatever weather if I don't have it?
Right.
You know, so the expectation on both sides is there.
Yes.
And what's the other side of it, right? The safety department comes out, see you're not wearing it, and they're going to go, what are you doing?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Well, you made that conscious choice because you're fixating on the idea that you got to get it done.
Right. Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I was younger when this particular situation came, and I was told, well, back in my day, we just got to do it. And I said, well, in my day, which is today, that's not acceptable.
No, we're not.
So, you know, but being told like, okay, learn to pick your battles. What does that even mean? You know, like, am I really going to risk anything now knowing that, again, my health is on me? It's not them that's going to go down if I'm not drinking water. It's not them that's going to end up with frostbite. It's not them that's going to have. It's me in the hospital, not them.
Yes.
And
then
I'm the
can
one
you
stuck
care
with it.
and love yourself to that degree where you can stand up for yourself? You only got you. You know, like
That's
you might have your friends and family, but at the end of the day, when it's time, it's just you.
Just you. And then, I'll end the quote off with this one. It's, there are things and tools and, in the aviation industry, it's safety was built off of blood. Somebody got hurt, whatever the case is, in most cases in general, safety was built because of someone getting hurt. So in other words, you got to do what you have to protect yourself. It's okay to say, I don't feel safe doing this. And if they let you go, well, now that company never cared about you to begin with. And like you said, you are replaceable. Unless you're in a very fortunate position where you have a lot of patents that you walked into the door with, but you are replaceable. There's like 8 billion of us on this planet so far, maybe 7, I haven't checked. But there's millions of us in this country. If a company really wanted to, they're going to find a way to get rid of you. And knowing that means, okay, well, navigate while you can, do the right thing, but also respect yourself enough to be like, okay, I recognize that I need a break. Can I, give me 10 minutes, or you know what, you're dumping so much on me. I understand that I need help with this work. And if they say, nope, it's all yours, you got to make a decision. Okay. And I always say, if you're going to walk out that door, at least make sure that you're 1 foot in another one.
Right. Exactly. Prepare.
You got to be prepared. And it's hard. It's going to be hard, but at some point too, it's like, what are you going to do? You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm glad you came. I'm glad we had a deeper conversation on it. If you ever want to come back and talk a little bit more in depth about other stuff, I'm more than happy to have you. I'm sure they'll be happy to have you.
Yes.
I think we're at like an hour.
Okay.
So, wow.
Yes. It was a good conversation though.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming out.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
How can you name your business one more time and how can they find you one more time?
So it's Transformative Rose. I also have my name, Rose Spirit Bay. You can find me on that though. So both Transformative Rose Spirit Bay. I'm doing a lot of construction and reconstruction with my business and stuff like that. So it's shifting because I also, I provide to executives and do one-on-one personal services as well. And then I also am a music artist. And so I'm like trying to figure out, okay, how to structure things differently so that they're all cohesive. And so I've been sort of restructuring and changing things, but Transformative Rose, right, or Rose Spirit Bay, and you can find me on my Linktree, and you can find that link on Instagram. If you have Instagram, is Transformative Rose, is it _ business on Instagram. I try not to be like super into Instagram. Instagram's just like a doorway to lead you to my link, really, so that you can get in touch with me.
Awesome. Again, nice to have you and love to see you come back.
Yes, thank you, Thomas.